administrator's gonna send out an email and update, talk to us about what's going on at the town. So I'll hopefully by September, we'll have a clearer path. But as of right now, we're not really sure. So that's for the next meeting. We're going to get an update on what we have, those boxes, and start moving forward with, taking care of those. The minute books, I had let you all know that last time I'd picked them up, and he had said he was going to get me that report. I haven't gotten it yet, and I followed up, but I'll follow up again.
What is the nature of the report? What are they reporting?
So the last time we picked up the books, he basically, it's like what the condition was and then what it looks like now. What he did, there's like color marks that you do when it's a preservation. I don't know if you remember the last one that he sent us, but it's basically what he did, and then the color scheme and just like a write-up of.
Because as I recall, the last few reports also mentioned what was still on the table to be done or what needed to be done. So, but we're completely finished with him. He has no other projects of ours.
Exactly. So 2020, great year for us, minute books wise.
Minute book wise.
Yes. Not to be insensitive. So moving right along. The mobile app and timeline, I know this has been an ongoing process. I don't really understand the data or how that all works, but apparently it's very difficult to change formats. Right now, all of the timeline is into raw data, and up till now, he has been unsuccessful moving the timeline. So what we're going to try to do now is to basically create another website that says timeline.mountpleasanthistorical.org, and we'll just link it onto the app, because the app, the way that it is not compatible with the scrolling of the timeline. So we're really just trying to do what we can with that data and not just lose it. But after all this, we won't have to pay for that second host. So that'll be good. I think that's an extra $1,000, $1,200 in our budget once all this is complete.
Do the people who provide us the app have anything even remotely like a timeline function that we could just simply input data into and it sits there? I understand non-compatibility in its current format, but if they have something that can function just as well as a timeline, just to
so that's what we were hoping for, but apparently not. That's what we were hoping for. They said that they would have had to build us something, and that right now that's not time permitting, and they would suggest doing something separate. Okay. So
this is Courtney. I was just going to ask, are we still going to have to pay that for this year, that fee that we had to pay last year for hosting the timeline?
So that's a good question. I would think that we wouldn't for the 20 to 21, but I'll confirm that we won't have to. Okay. Because I'm pretty sure it's completely offline by now. I'm not sure if it was completely offline by July 1st. So that's something that I'll have to confirm for you. Because it's important for the budget, I know. I'm sorry. So our social media is doing really great. We've up to over 1,000 followers and continuing to post. Our intern actually helped us writing up some more possible social media posts, things that he found in in the history room that were interesting. And then lastly, we had an email from somebody. It was pretty confusing the way our website was worded, made it seem like Charles Pinckney was, he's under the Founding Fathers page, and he's called like a forgotten founding father, but just made it clear on there that he did not sign the Declaration of Independence, but the Constitution. So just made that a little more clear on the website, and able to update the historical marker list online with our newest markers and the marker map. So both of those are current and online. And I'm going to be working with our GIS department. This is just future knowledge. So I'll be able to, moving on in our committee reports, I'll be able to better help us with creating color-coded maps and making our own maps, basically, in the future. I'm going to be able to be trained on that, so we can do that project more easily together. And that concludes my staff report, unless anybody has any questions.
All right, well, the next item is the intern final report. Mr. Melstenger, you're gonna present your activities?
Yes, sir. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So basically this whole thing, the cataloging of the history room took like a week and a half. 564 things total were given their own unique ID and placed into one of 12 categories. Like the overall goal for the project was basically to organize and create like some sort of finding aid based on like very, very broad categories. And overall it was like a lot of trial and error. I kind of changed once I moved past like the first drawer, I kind of changed my methodology as far as how I was IDing, mostly like folders and that sort of thing. And also, too, a lot of the categories were kind of altered throughout the process of cataloging, and I'll explain that in a bit. But basically, I started on the left side of the room with the cabinets, with the drawers. They were labeled like left to right, top to bottom, and each of the divisions within the drawers were labeled as letters. So if it was like the first drawer in the first cabinet, it was like cabinet 1, drawer 1, and then division like A, if it was the farthest division to the left. Basically, I was a lot more conservative with giving like everything an ID in the beginning. I wrote notes on pretty much everything, and there was some redundancy I realized with writing notes on everything and giving every single item an ID. And kind of once I moved on past the first drawer, I realized that wasn't really necessary. And as a whole, this was one of the hardest things to decide, was like figuring out which articles were important to ID. So typically I only gave ID'd articles that were like oral histories or stories of some kind, or if they looked like they came from some sort of research journal and contained like primary sources, I usually did not ID them. Basically, there were like a couple of news articles that I ID'd, but again, it was but that was only if they were deemed very important, and pretty much everything else, like the only articles that were ID'd were, again, the oral histories and the stories and the articles that looked like they came from a journal with plenty of references. And then the whole, like, the categorization of the objects was pretty subjective. Like, I may have thought something belonged in a government document category, but another person might have thought it should have been listed as like simply a book. And there are a lot of kind of blurred lines as far as, differentiating between like brochures and pamphlets and ads and notices. And so that's kind of why I made that like one big category. I guess probably I should have started by like saying the categories. So it was articles, audio files, brochures, notices, etc., books and booklets, folders and binders, government documents, flash surveys and reports, magazines and newsletters, maps, like physical objects, some sort of like video files like DVD, because that sort of DVD and like tapes, that sort of thing, and then visual material, which was mainly photographs, and then yeah, I believe that was it. Yeah, so basically, again, with the first drawer, I gave a lot more things IDs than I needed to. And by the time I kind of changed my methodology on giving items IDs, it was too late to go back and like change the old IDs for the items I had already inventoried. So basically, like after about the first drawer, most of the dividers were not given IDs if they contained lots of contents, which were. So like that was the hardest part for me, was differentiating between a divider and like a standard, 3-pronged folder and a manila folder and a manila package. So I explained like all that in detail in the report. But overall, like manila folders, unless they were unmarked or if they contain like multiple copies of the same type of thing, like government documents, like that was pretty common in the like the Bayview Acres stuff in the second drawer of the first cabinet. Those manila folders were almost always given an ID. And then once I moved on to past the first drawer, I did a lot of grouping. So if there was a folder that was full of government documents, I marked that as like, one big folder. And just in the notes section, I explained what the contents of that folder were. And then later on, after the second drawer, the folder started containing more than just like government documents and articles. So basically, I started marking those documents. I still did grouping, but I started marking them under the government documents tab rather than folders and binders. And then around the second drawer is when I began to like make the spreadsheet a lot easier to read and started putting spaces between under the folders and binders tab to differentiate like a movement in between like drawer division and drawer and cabinet. And I explained all that in the report. And again, keep in mind that was just for the folders and binders tab that I use that like kind of spacing system. And if no particular folders were marked in the divider, but like the contents were, so say the contents were all books or audio files or brochures or whatever, the divider was still marked in the spreadsheet, but it wasn't given an ID. So it was basically just like a placeholder. And I went back and did that for the first cabinet as well. And then if the dividers were unnamed, which there were quite a few dividers that were unnamed, they were just marked like unnamed or unmarked divider in whatever drawer division it was in. As far as the visual material, like most photos and large maps, even if unmarked, I was told to give them an ID. But I didn't ID most smaller maps that were like attached to something else, like a government document or whatever. I usually only ID them if they were on the larger side and standalone. And then once I got to the second cabinet, like with all the property surveys, I counted every single survey. So basically everything was its own tax number. And even if there were like 2 or 3 surveys associated with one address, I counted every single survey. And so for that reason, basically I attempted to count out every single property. I might have been a few off because like some of these boxes had like, I think one had like 400 something properties. So I didn't, basically in the notes section of I marked the box in government documents and I just said like, 2 mile through 6 mile box or whatever it was. And then I marked all the street names down as opposed to just like the individual properties. And again, yeah, some of the properties might have been a little out of order and it was kind of hard because especially in the first box, a lot of the properties were in like manila folders, but some of the others were like just like loose leaf, or some of the surveys, I'm sorry, were in manila folders, but some of them were just like loose leaf. And pretty much after that, it was pretty simple. Like after those cabinets with the drawers, I did the quilt on the back, the Dupree quilt, and then moved on to the cabinet closets. And I guess for me, like differentiating between, I didn't really know exactly what the difference was between like a cash receipt book and a disbursement book, to be honest. And it took me some figuring out to like flipping through the books to kind of figure out like how to tell the difference. And after that, basically was the metal display shelves. A lot of stuff I didn't really, was just kind of there. I really had no idea what it was, and Miss Miller said she would kind of go back through my spreadsheet and give some more information on some of those items because she knew more about them than I did. And then again, after the display shelves, I moved on to the center table drawers, which a lot of which contain repeats of like maps I had seen, especially in like the Bayview Acres drawer back in the first cabinet. So if an item was repeated, which was pretty common, I like noted so in the notes tab where the item like was originally given an ID. And then after that, I per request, I gave the maps and stuff and pictures, the drawing, sketchings on the front wall. I was told to give those an ID as well. So that concludes the cataloging. And then after I did that, it was suggested that I should add a keywords tab. So I did that on the spreadsheet. So basically, like if it ever was converted to something that, you know, people could like, if it was ever converted to something that could become searchable, you know, besides just like Control F, it would be nice to like, you know, give the items keywords. So, you know, if like thinking about what a person might search for if they were to like, you know, look up a particular item. And the keywords were pretty broad. Like entertainment was like referred to everything from TV shows to magazine issues. And then environment was like, you know, actual areas of nature and parks and green spaces and whatnot, but also like environmental issues and concerns like with the Bayview boat ramp and that sort of thing. And then if there was a keyword which was the same as the name of the tab, that keyword was not used on the tab because that would be redundant. So like I didn't mark government as a keyword for every government document. Overall, one thing I'd hope to be able to find was more dates of acquisition, as in like when we received the item. I don't think I found any, to be honest, just because it just wasn't marked really on any of the items. And pretty much that's about it for the cataloging. I'd say in the report, I kind of marked some other stuff about like some really interesting stuff that I found. I'd say like overall, you know, the project went pretty smoothly, but there were a lot of things that didn't. You know, all projects like this have some room for improvement. And the hardest thing for me was that so many things, especially like the manila folders, weren't marked. So I kind of had to, you know, come up with my own system for that. And so that made it kind of hard to ID certain objects and place them within a quote unquote folder. And then also too, like the photos, and there's a lot of visual stuff like photos, maps, or whatever that was unmarked. And especially like even some of the audio, like CDs and DVDs, it was just the discs. And you know, I figured like that's not the most efficient thing if I can literally only put in my spreadsheet like DVD, and there's no title, no author, and then like date inventoried, and like where it is, and that was it. You know, obviously I didn't really know where to play a DVD or a CD, so I didn't really know about a lot of what that stuff was. And basically, again, maybe just like some of my recommendations for this would be like kind of like browsing through these collections before like I actually started cataloging, just to establish a more concrete definition of like folder. So somebody knows whether to ID like a manila folder versus a manila package versus like an actual folder or a binder or a divider, or possibly none of those. Like it was kind of confusing figuring all that out. And again, I kind of had to, maybe coming up with like more specific categories from the get-go would be a good idea, because I kind of had to edit a lot of the categories like as I went along through the cataloging. And then defining which types of articles should be given their own ID is also pretty crucial. Then establishing more of a fine line between the categories rather than some of the blurred ones that kind of I came across cataloging this time. And then also like the repeat items. There were a lot of repeat items, and I know that again, 554 items were given their own unique ID, and the room is huge. So I figured like I went into with the mindset that probably there were going to be some repeat items, but sometimes that was a little hard having to go back through the spreadsheet and find an item I had like marked like a week earlier, and you know, put it in the notes like, oh, this is also found in, you know, table drawer number 7 or whatever. And then yeah, again, just the metal display shelves, a lot of the stuff was unlabeled, but that can easily be fixed. And you know, I generally knew kind of like what most of them were. But the inventory sheet, like that was my saving grace. Like that, having the inventory sheet to base my cataloging off was super nice for sure. So I thank Ms. Miller for making that a lot because that helped me a lot. But yeah, as a whole, I thoroughly enjoyed going through all the stuff in there. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and I learned a lot about Mount Pleasant's history for sure that I didn't even know existed, and how a lot of this stuff kind of still affects and shapes Mount Pleasant today. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you all.
Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work on doing that. We've been sitting there watching it disorganized for years now.
Yeah,
Thank you, Matthew.
of course.
Matthew, before we sign off on your section, what's next for you? Where are you going after you're done with this internship?
Yeah, so I finished up like a week and a half ago, or about that now. So I go to Wake Forest. I'm about to be a sophomore there, so I'm going back next weekend, I think. So yeah, it was a great internship though. I also did again some of the social media posts like Miss Miller was saying, and then I try to do a little bit of research on that cemetery. Didn't really find a whole lot, but I tried. And then I did some. You guys were trying to do some sort of COVID newspaper timeline, so I kind of went through all the newspapers from like early April to June and found out, when it was. Like I marked all the articles that were related to COVID. And I think that was about it. But yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks, Matthew.
Again,
We appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.
Do we need to abandon ship?
Remember to mute your mic when you're not speaking and then unmute when you're speaking.
Is now exiting.
That'll help.
I think the unpleasantness is past. Onward to committee action items.
So this is one that Rick had asked to be on the agenda this time. So he wanted to begin discussion on Black History Month. I do know that Courtney had also added some suggestions about Black History Month down in her administrative report as well. But this is the time that we can begin that discussion.
Is Antonio in here?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was just going to ask, is Antonio here?
No, he is not here.
Oh, okay.
Did we have any rough calendar dates or items that were being suggested for February of next year?
Yes, I had put together something last year with, some events that didn't work out, didn't pull through. One being Anne Caldwell, I believe, with the Magnolia Singers. That was one of the events.
Separate from whatever else we do, or if the town has a policy in place come February for when we're having public gatherings or such. If we're having, I just think it's problematic to start planning any musical numbers with large singing groups. So choir groups, multi-bass, I just don't know what's going to be different in February from now, but I don't necessarily see a choir concert venue being something that we can produce.
Understood.
The two notes, oh, sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of tag on to what Patrick said, because I don't think all that much is going to change by February. And maybe we should be thinking about virtual events, or, some other type of, I don't know, but I think, those large in-person gatherings, I just don't see those as being very safe.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what I'm saying is, even beyond that, even if we go virtual and we just have something that we broadcast, it's still going to be problematic if the thing we're broadcasting is something that's a larger group or a singing group. So I think the focus should be on, lectures or a small group, small panel presentation that we can either go virtual, or if the world changes, we can go live. But
Agreed.
Limit the number that's going to be on the stage or in front of the camera.
I took that down. That sounds good. A good direction to go in.
On that note, I had three things also. For the presentations, I think that's something just that we can expand that becomes valuable for us overall as a commission, because we can do things like have history hour once a month where we like live stream or YouTube from the history room and talk about something that's in there. And this is something we could kind of stage into, because we can do it from anywhere. So we could do it from our different locations. We could do it with different speakers, and then you don't have to have the crowd. We can just push the information out and people can sign in, and that would work with our social as well. And again, that just ends up depending on what we're allowed to do with Facebook Live or something like that. But we can use the YouTube live streaming and do the presentations from the history room and from these other venues, and then kind of build off of the Black History Month, where we start to have, when we had National whatever day, we could, actually do an event from somewhere that ties the history of National Post Day to, the post office downtown in the old village or something. So on that ties into something we can build out, which ties into the maps. When we have some of the maps, we might, if we get the Black History map done in time for Black History Month, we could stage that and use that same approach and go out and walk the map, or, be on the map on one Sunday and be at a different location on the second Sunday and things like that, and launch the Black History map walking tour during Black History Month. And then the third thing was I had been working on and trying to find, and Matthew might be able to tell me if he found any, or if we have some of those audio files to review for this, but I had been trying to find for Walter the oral histories that had been captured. I've been speaking to a number of people at the College of Charleston and following up with different people, Battery Gadsden, to find out where they house the oral histories and the connections, because they're doing the oral history project with College of Charleston. Joe Kelly doing the Irish oral histories. I've talked to the Black History Department. I've talked to numerous people there, and I cannot find the oral histories. I've talked to our library system, both libraries. I've talked to the major library in Charleston. So I don't know where those oral histories are housed. And I've been just going off of that information that Walter gave me. And I can't find minutes prior to 2017 or whatever's on the site. That's why I wanted to get back into the SharePoint and see if maybe it was some way I could find them in there. But I do not know, I can't find any details on that actual oral history project that was done with Walter and others to capture that information. So I need to revisit that. And maybe Matthew, some of those audio files are the ones that we were looking for. I don't know. So I'll follow up after the meeting offline for that. But that's what I've been working on for the Black History Month.
This is Courtney. Teresa, those are awesome ideas. I love the idea of doing some kind of an oral history project, or expanding on the one that we've already done, or launching some of that content during Black History Month. I'll say that Historic Charleston Foundation has a program called Tangled Roots, where they did a series of oral histories on Johns Island, if you want to take a look at that. It's really interesting.
I love the idea too. I think they're great. I'll be happy to help you out, Teresa.
I think Rick's concern on getting this on the calendar and to try to talk about it was to try to start fleshing out a calendar, but I don't know if we're anywhere close to fleshing out a calendar yet. And I also thought that after the last meeting, Antonio chimed in afterwards and said that he had some ideas lined up that he wanted to present to us. Am I remembering that right?
Maybe we could start with a list of the things that are important that we think are important to promote. I know in the past we've done the events where people have come, but maybe we could make a list and kind of try to work from Matthew's categories and include all the sites, and then maybe include all the people, and then we'd be able to take that information and kind of work backward into these. So say if we do have a person, we could find out who can give a presentation on that person. Would we be able to, have an electronic presentation or a meeting with that person and let them present? Where are the locations? Is it something where we could have somebody go and, bring a list and read from the list and talk about that, and we could capture it on camera or Facebook Live and that kind of thing. So maybe if we just start with a list first of all the things that we think are important to communicate during Black History Month, the locations, and kind of tie them to those categories, we could start there. Matthew, is there a way we could take some of the stuff that you've put together? Is any of it identified where we would be able to align it with Black History Month promotion?
Actually, yeah. So basically, with the whole keyword thing that I was talking about, one of the keywords I put was like African American, and there's also like settlement community and oral history. So, I mean, I guess like using those keywords, not everything, that not every item that has those keywords is necessarily related specifically to Black History Month, but a lot of these early articles that were found in like the early drawers, that were in like the African American Heritage like folder or divider, whatever it was, those were like there were some brochures about Black History Month events and that sort of thing. So I guess you could kind of use that to do it.
Yeah, that might be a good way to start if we could kind of do that. And thank you so much for the keywords and hashtags, because that was something really important that I wanted to highlight as well when we got back to that. Especially if we move all these documents to electronics with SharePoint, we're going to absolutely need to be able to cross-reference them. So thank you so much for starting the keyword process. Yeah, because we have to tag them.
Yeah.
The administrative hurdle on this one, and I agree with the focus, because I would much rather have our History Month focused on history and pulling more facts and things we want to teach. But it's a shift, because the paradigm before has been we find presenters, speakers, entertainers, and we put them in for the weekends. If we're going to pick topics, then it has to be determined long enough that we can find someone, and it's going to take a month or 2 months to find someone who's willing to present, and then presenting them with topics we'd like them to present upon. So I really think we need to have topics and targets identified by September, no later than early October, if we're going to have people present in February. I agree with the plan. I just think the deadline needs to be within a month and a half.
No, so is that something we can do? Can Matthew backtrack and just make us a list before he leaves? Are we able to go through and make a list and start with that to have it for the September meeting? Because I agree. I think if we can do that, I mean, the one value is from a national perspective and from from our budgetary perspective, it makes it more valuable for us because we're able to reach out and possibly get people that we don't have to pay to sit and do a presentation for us. So there is, a lot that we can develop from it.
So Matthew's internship is over. He's completed his section of it, but I have the Excel sheet up on our OneDrive. And so one of our commission members can go through there, or I can organize a time for someone to come into the history room and actually see it. But Matthew doesn't live here, and so his internship section is over. He's on here just as a citizen.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
if the Excel's on the OneDrive, then can't we all just look at it, and by September, anyone has a topic we want to have discussed, commission member, do you have a topic you want to talk about, or find someone to talk about? Just do the word search off the hashtags and present it at the September meeting.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yes. I'll resend that link out for everybody, and just let me know if you're having any problems getting it. I can send it just as an Excel sheet too.
And just to remember, when we get to the end of the meeting today, that the last item being for discussion items for next month, that it be clearly that commission members identify Black History Month topics from our archive spreadsheet for consideration.
real quick, one question on the oral histories before we move on. Matthew, were you able to identify, did those oral histories have any information or names on them, or do we need to listen to them to find out what they are? And are they on that drive as well? Am I able to listen to them?
So you're referring to the stuff that's on like the DVDs and the CDs?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Most of them, there wasn't like, I know I'm looking at the audio tab right now. There was a CD on like it was labeled like Lucasville Historical Info. So I might have some stuff on it. There was also a CD, these are both in drawer 1, by the way, labeled at Actual Voice Oral Histories 1991. So there's that. And then as far as DVDs go, or visual or video stuff, there's the Abby Monroe papers. And as far as things related to that topic, I think that's about it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, and that's much earlier than the ones we're looking for. I'm looking for like 2016. So, okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to the next item, Special Collection Committee, and that we have the action on collected newspapers. Is this a Matthew presentation as well?
So I went ahead and just, I've got a list of all the newspapers here, and he made up the list and he wrote all of the article titles, who they're by, their date, which newspaper it came from. And so we kept all the newspapers, and he made this whole list. And I was just unclear personally from the last meeting and from the minutes. I'm sorry, I just wasn't exactly sure. With keeping the newspapers, do we want to maybe scan in the certain articles? Do we want to cut them out? Do we want to keep all the newspapers? We have the list. We have all of the articles still. Could you just refresh my memory on what we're going to do with the actual newspapers and moving forward with this?
We didn't have, as I recall the last meeting, we simply said we're going to let the intern take a look at it, volume and importance-wise, and then we would discuss afterwards, based on how much was in it, as to whether to maintain it, keep it in the archive, or what. But first question, the list of the articles that are have we done the first cull in that we've cut the articles out of the paper, or we just have the page that has the article on it, as opposed to having all the newspapers for the various dates listed? What do we have as the material?
Matthew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I couldn't really hear that, but I think basically what I did was I pretty much every single newspaper from whenever you guys started collecting them till like June 11th, I think was the last one. They all had at least one article that was related to COVID-19. But basically, if the headline wasn't related to COVID, like just to mark it, I put non-COVID related headline, like you can see, and then all articles that were related to COVID were given a bullet point.
We have the full newspaper for each of the dates that you have in the summary sheet.
Yeah.
So how big is this stack?
65 newspapers, I think.
Say again?
I think it's 65 newspapers total, or 66. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely do not need to keep that volume in there. Is it all just sitting in the archive room right now?
Yeah, should be. I never moved it.
Hi, it's Debbie. Can't we just scan them? Scan them in, put them in a file?
I say we sit on this for a while and let it just sit in the room for a bit to think about it, because one, the Post and Courier keeps its own archives. Various libraries keep them of it as well. We don't need to start keeping them as well. And if we started having people scan in all the articles, I mean, that's a labor cost, but I don't necessarily see the value at the end of it. But I mean, for now, I just let it sit, and as the event continues before us, we can decide what we want to do with it. Because right now, we just have a snapshot from April 8th to June 11th, and the significance of having Post and Courier newspapers stored in our archive room is dubious to me. But my proposal, we sit and wait on, and we'll think about how to restore, maintain a history of the COVID era on another month.
Anybody else motion and second to move on this action item? It is an action item, so we have to make a motion and then.
Right, I'll make a motion.
Okay, I was going to motion that we revisit how do we maintain any archive, if any, of the COVID era in our December meeting.
I'll second.
Awesome.
Anybody
So-
opposed? I think the ayes have it. It's an action item moved to December for review.
Can you guys see that tourism committee report up now
No,
on the shared? Can you see it now?
Yes.
yeah,
Okay. So this
Yes.
is the next item on the list, right? So
Yes, I'll take that one. This is Debbie. We are moving forward. We just completed the spreadsheet with the 70 markers on it with questions and answers. And Teresa and Brian and I put that together. I'm going to put the finishing touches on it. Teresa's been working on a PowerPoint presentation that looks great. And we need to get together with Kate and find out if there's a way that we can, if we need to do printing and exactly, what physical form this is going to take. Most of this could be downloaded if people want to participate. So we're still working on it. We also want to do a video. And we know that there's only one person in the communications department, so we're kind of, at the mercy of their workload. And so we'll just, work with them to get that completed and uploaded as they are available to us. And then we also want to do some publicity. So we're still, I guess we're kind of at point number 2 on the report, which would be also developing a cost estimate. I don't think this is going to be very expensive to do at all, but we will have to meet with staff to determine that. Teresa or Brian, do you want to add anything?
Nothing on my end right now.
Nope, you covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Debbie, this is Courtney. Can I just comment that whenever you do get somewhat of an idea of how much it would cost, that you could just CC me on that so that I can add it to the budget?
Will do, Courtney.
Thank you.
As far as action items, that we anticipate we'll get more updates and more progress next month. So is this something we're just going to keep on as an action item?
Yes, Patrick, I think I was hoping that we would be able to get this completed and implemented by the August, but I think that was a little bit aggressive, just given the fact that people are not necessarily working at the town hall. And so I'm pretty confident we can get this done and implemented by the end of September. It gives us a little bit more lead time. So if we could put it on the agenda for September, that would be great.
Yeah, take the time we need to get the product we want, but just to keep it as a action item moving forward.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to, just to be safe, to make the motion. I had put it on as create this program. It was brought up last time, but I had mistakenly sent out 2 invitations, so we weren't all able to be at the meeting. And just to make an action, make a motion that the commission is going to do this project and later on commit a certain amount of money, basically just to be safe, to make sure that if we need it, in case we needed to make a motion on this, it's an action item. So if we could.
All right, I'll make a motion. It's Debbie. I would like to make a motion that the Historical Commission is going to develop a passport project and with the associated video, and there would be maps also included. And we're hoping to implement this by the end of September, and there will be some nominal cost included to be determined.
I'll second. This is Teresa.
Thanks, guys.
Then we have to
take a vote. Assume all in favor or any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Do we move to Organization and Admin Committee?
There is one more, actually under the Tourism Committee, there's one more item that Teresa has really been heading up, that we had put on pause from the last meeting. And so this is her committee report here that she'd like to propose to the commission. Teresa?
So my proposal was, in order to support both the passport program and also to start to expand our opportunities with social and those monthly meetings that I mentioned earlier, and align with the upcoming Mount Pleasant Way, that we start working with a color-coded map for these walking tours and build out these walking tours. We have 1 or 2 other tours already on the website. One is the bridge tour, obviously not walking, but we have the Black History tour, and we have another tour. So my thought was to start to duplicate the old village tour and walking tour that we have, with taking the questions and some of the information as we're developing the passport. And so we can run in parallel. We'll identify the monuments, markers, or sites that align with the title of the tour. So example, Black History Tour, and then maybe we're using Sweetgrass and we're using the brick chimney and a few other locations. And then we color code that tour in a visual, working with Kate in the GIS. So basically, when you look at the site, you'll have a list of tours: the Old Village Tour, Black History Tour, an industry tour, what other 2 or 3 others, and we can align with the categories that Matthew had started working on. But basically, we identify a few different categories of historical information that drove the development of Mount Pleasant, and then we align those with a color-coded tour. And so when you choose the Passport or working with the Passport program, you can basically take tours based on interest, and these tours can then be sort of aligned with that Mount Pleasant Way. So as we start to build into the Mount Pleasant Way, the Historical Commission is already in front of that. We've already identified specific locations along this area, and they're valued historically, and that information can then be pushed up when Mount Pleasant Way starts, and they can kind of take what we've done and incorporate that into the Mount Pleasant Way. So again, getting in front of future development, but and getting our visibility there for engagement, and aligning our website and electronic information now to the history room, so we could start driving that traffic into these events, into the history room, and giving us more information for social. So then if I propose, I guess then the action would be for us to take all this information and go ahead and identify at least a minimum of 3 new tours and build them out the way that the Old Village tour has been built out, and give them color coded.
Teresa, this is Courtney. I was just going to ask, is there any signage planned for the Mount Pleasant Way at all?
No, Mount Pleasant Way isn't built, but if you look, Mount Pleasant Way has submitted maps, and they have some color-coded things on things that they're doing, like they've identified, wetlands, neighborhoods, waterfront gateways, different things like that throughout, and then they've kind of identified an area where they want to build Mount Pleasant Way, because they'd have to be connected throughout these. So there is a projected vision, but again, even if we don't align perfectly, at least we've already identified some things. So when they're building, they might want to say, oh, let's also include this because it's 20 feet over, or it's in the same section. Didn't go that deep into it to align exactly.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's a good idea.
Thank you. Okay, so when I said action, do I need a motion for it, Kate, or what do we want to do next step?
Yes, so Teresa just made a motion to move forward with this, identify 3 broad tours, identify the markers along those tours, and work with staff on creating maps. So that was what Teresa had motioned.
Do I have a second?
This is Brian. I'll second that.
All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Now, Organization and Administration Committee.
Moving. Yep.
So if you took a look at the report before, I don't know if anyone had a chance to, but I just started by noting some of our accomplishments from the last fiscal year in order of chronological order. And we had a pretty busy year, so I just wanted to sort of add that to the record. And then moving on to the bottom, you can just take a look through it. I mean, I don't have to go over it. But moving through, I wanted us to sort of openly discuss what some of our main objectives were for this year, because as I started going through the budget, it occurred to me that the dollar amount that we normally would put forward for Black History Month might not be, something that we can do this year in the same capacity like we discussed earlier. So I wanted to bring up with everyone how we think the dollars should be allocated for this year. And so it might be something like allocating a little bit more for historical markers or research. We have about, I think, $8,000 left over after we pay our website fees and pay for the Cresto Award. And all that pretty much got eaten up by Black History Month last year. So that's essentially what we're working with budget-wise. I don't know, Kate, would it be more helpful to bring up the spreadsheet?
So I'm thinking that we're identifying cost for the tourism projects and the video. Maybe we would review this and then in September make recommendations for different allocation based on what we come up with the list for Black History Month in September. I don't know personally that I'm comfortable to allocate the funds to different areas right now, not knowing what, like to your point, the direction of where we're trying to go. But if we know that we're building the new passport program, we're building the new color-coded maps, and we're going to be looking at having different types of presentations and Black History Month from that perspective, maybe then what we're able to do is once we've identified all those, we can take this and revisit how we distribute information about the town and our cards and things like that. And maybe this money would be then better spent to be able to use it for promotional purposes with the social channels or with the items that we distribute. And we could do something like that. So I would think we would be better to kind of take all this in and then come back in September with use cases or allocation.
Yeah, that might be a good thing to include Rick in as well, because I feel like the Black History Month budget is the biggest question mark right now. And the cost associated with producing videos, if that's what we want to do, we might incur some expense there. And then there also might be a cost associated with getting guest speakers. I'm not sure it will be as much as we paid last year for a guest speaker or guest lecturer or workshops or whatever we end up doing online, but there probably will be some associated costs. So, I mean, I can pencil in, last year I allocated $4,000 into public education and we went over budget in that area. But I could just allocate sort of similar cost, assuming that we would need to pay some speakers and there would be a cost associated with video broadcast or producing videos. Essentially.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. And for the video, just so you know, if you look at that one video, I think basically what they did was a voiceover with a PowerPoint, and they just kind of recorded that. So there are options. And I think at this point, we were kind of thinking that, we could definitely do that for a minimal cost perspective versus hiring someone or filming a video. And then we could kind of always step into doing more things where we're engaged and outside in the community and then film. So that might be something we can kind of work toward.
Yeah.
Do we have a date by which we have to approve our budget? Are we required by the town to approve it by a certain date?
I'll double check. I don't think that there is. It's not like that. Like elections have to happen in a certain month. It's just the new fiscal year, and so we're going through the budget. I have to double check in our ordinance. I don't think that there is.
We do not, and we have not. And the way it's generally worked, we get our 10,000. If we've wanted to allocate some things and earmark them, we've done that. But we have always kept it as a moving target because we rarely spent what we said we were going to do on earmarked items, and then we always move that money around to whatever we can fund before the $10,000 goes away. So I think we can earmark wherever you want to earmark it, and we can, as actual costs are presented to us, then we take the votes and approve those costs.
Yes, we're supposed to keep our budget, but like Patrick said, it's not generally a moving target, but we're supposed to keep it.
It's fluid.
Yeah. Well, especially this year, I just think it might just, we'll have our balance and know how much we have to spend, and as projects crop up, we can work within our budget. I mean, is that acceptable to everyone?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll keep this moving forward, and it'll just kind of be like an ongoing tracker as we continue to make decisions. Does that make sense?
Very good.
Okay.
I don't think we need a vote on that. So are we done with budget items and administrative items?
Yes.
And thank you for that summary. I like the history point at the beginning, too.
Sure.
All right, the next item is next month's agenda. We've identified some items already. The Black History Month selection that all of us get to make if we have any items we want considered. And then the passport program will be revisited in the tours. Any other items that we need to place on next month's agenda? Hearing none, I move on. Anyone wish to motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Matthew, if you're still online, thank you very much for all your hard work. Sorry we didn't get to meet in person.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Have a good one. Take care.
Everybody stay healthy. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Patrick.
Thanks, Kate. Another great meeting.
Talk soon.